everyone, welcome back to the channel and to today's viewer's email, which has come in from a guy called Henry. So a huge shout out to Henry for sending this in. We all really appreciate it. And as always, if any of you guys have a story that you want to share about yourself or about someone you know, as long as it's Thailand related, please do so by using the email address in the description. We do rely on these emails coming in to continue with the channel, so all stories are most welcome. If you are sending in a story, it ideally needs to be around 15 minutes to read out. We've had a few short stories in, but these don't really fit in with the video's ideal length. But what we're going to do is read through the email in its entirety, then I'll break it down, give you my opinions, my take, and I'll open the floor for you guys in the comments to give your take as well. Don't forget to give the video a like, subscribe if you haven't already, comment, share and all those good things, so a big thanks in advance for doing that. The subject of the email from Henry was an expensive Thailand lesson. So, let's get into it. Dear John, I suppose my story will be ridiculed by many, but if it acts as a warning to a few, then it will definitely serve its purpose. I'm originally from the UK, but I lived in Spain since the age of 25, where I worked in the tourism industry. I was quite successful and I loved Spain, but I knew it wasn't going to be my forever home. In around 2010, I was still a good 5 years away from retirement, but I thought it was about time to do a bit of travelling to see if I could find a place that I thought could be for me when I finally reached retirement age. I had a friend who raved about the Philippines, so, on his advice, I flew to Manila for a 2-week adventure, travelling to a few spots in the country. My first impression of the Philippines was not what I was expecting. It seemed a bit more third world than the descriptions I had read, or from how it was described to me by my friend. But after settling into my hotel in Makati and a few days witnessing all that the place had to offer, I was sold. I visited Angeles City and Cebu and quickly thought that this was going to be the place for me. I met a wonderful Filipina girl on my 5th day and she stayed with me for the rest of my holiday, but we failed to keep in touch after I left. I knew I needed to give the Philippines another go, so I went the following year, that time for 3 weeks, and also went the next 3 years on the trot. I explored more of the country and had decided that this was going to be the place I would retire. On my visit in 2015, I knew this was going to be my last visit before retirement, and I happened to meet a great Filipina girl. I told her of my intention to move to the Philippines the following year in 2016. We had an immediate connection. I was 52 at the time, and she was 27. She spent most of my holiday with me, and we kept in touch daily when I was back in Spain. I had fallen in love with her, and she seemed to reciprocate. I sent her a bit of money every month, and I thought of her as my girlfriend. At the end of 2015, I put my house for sale in Spain and it sold within a few months. I began to finalise my retirement plans. I sold all the things I didn't need and was left with a bag that contained all the things I owned in the world. It felt very liberating, and in April 2016, I flew to the Philippines. I was met at the airport in Manila by my girlfriend and decided to live the first few weeks in holiday mode before settling down, finding a place to live and sorting out a proper visa. We went to a beautiful beach resort and things were looking great. When we got back to Manila, I began looking for a place to stay and gave my girlfriend's number to a few agents. A few days later, we were getting some calls about suitable properties which my girlfriend dealt with, but one call came through when she was otherwise occupied. I answered the phone and it wasn't a real estate agent. It was a man who asked who I was. I did the same, and yes, this was her other boyfriend. When I confronted her, she tried to deny it, but the man had said who he was, so she eventually admitted to it. I felt like a fool, and I had probably sent her and given her a total of $5,000, and she played me. I broke off with her straight away, and it left me feeling stuck. What was I going to do now? I spent a few days feeling sorry for myself down P. Burgos Street in Makati, and I just so happened to get talking to a guy from the US. I told him what had happened, how my retirement got off on the wrong foot. He didn't seem surprised, but he did tell me something that would change my life forever. He lived in Thailand, but often visited the Philippines when he wanted a change of pace. We got talking about Thailand, a country that was never really on my radar. The way he described it made it sound amazing. After a number of whiskey cokes, I had made my mind up that I at least needed to go for a look, and now being a free agent, with no girlfriend and no job to hold me back, I booked a ticket for Bangkok a few days later. I told myself that it was worth exploring just to see how it compared to the Philippines. I had yet to find an apartment in the Philippines, so I packed my things, headed to the airport, and boarded my flight to Bangkok, Thailand. My immediate reaction to Thailand was that of the Philippines on steroids: more developed, better infrastructure, and a wilder party scene. Nana Plaza and the surrounding area made P. Burgos Street look tame in comparison, and the town of Pattaya had all the haunts of Angeles City, but it felt safer, cleaner, and I even found it to be cheaper for certain things. Why had I not considered Thailand before? I had been travelling to the Philippines for 5 years, and if I'd have known, I would most likely have gone to Thailand instead. I knew absolutely nothing about Thailand. Could I even get a visa to live in the country? Could I rent an apartment for the same price as the Philippines? And what was the overall cost of living? These were all things I wanted to find out before my return flight to the Philippines in a month's time. I spent the first few weeks toing and froing between Bangkok and Pattaya, and was quickly coming to realise that if anything, Thailand was cheaper in many ways. The apartments I checked out were of better quality and were more affordable than in equivalent places in the Philippines. The food was better and more varied, and the place felt a lot safer. And to top it off, I could get a retirement visa. All I needed to do was deposit 800,000 Thai baht in an account, and I could get the visa indefinitely. So, coming on the end of 2016, I decided not to even return to the Philippines. Thailand was going to be my home instead. I settled on the idea of living in Pattaya and found a small apartment with sea views. I couldn't believe it was only 13,000 baht a month, and to top it off, it had a great pool as well. I loved Pattaya and was quickly drawn into the bar scene. Happy hour beers, cheap Western food, and abundance of the most beautiful women in the world. I hadn't yet learned of the ways of the women in Thailand. I assumed it was going to be like the Philippines, but there were quite a few noticeable differences between the two. First off, English was a lot more widely spoken to a good level in the Philippines, and I felt like you could read the girls in the Philippines a lot easier. I had never had as much attention in my life, and I was loving it, and couldn't wait to find the one to settle down with. I know many of your viewers are going to say you shouldn't meet a girl in a bar, that's the biggest mistake of them all. But at the time, I thought it was just how you did things in Thailand. The relationship with my first Thai girlfriend was short-lived. Fun while it lasted, but her endless demands for money and gifts quickly turned me off, and I broke it off with her after about 3 weeks. No harm done. I desperately wanted to find someone who wanted me for me and not my money, and that's when I met someone who seemed so different from the rest. She was shy and reserved and never demanded anything. I got along with her straight away, and things got serious quite quickly. She worked at a bar in Pattaya when we met, and that didn't bother me, but soon enough she was living with me full time. She was 24 and had a 7-year-old child from a previous relationship, and she told me she was from a place called Kalasin. I had no idea where that was. I had no children of my own, and while it did put me off a bit, I wrote it off as being a Thailand thing. The next 3 months were great. We got to know each other very well, and she not once asked for money or gifts. I did give her some money every now and then, but she never asked. That was the way I liked it. By this time, I was still really loving Pattaya, but I was spending way too much time drinking in the bars. My girl was always waiting for me when I returned, but having been a drinker in the past, I could see myself spiraling downwards very quickly if I wasn't careful. I felt like I needed to get away for a while, and this is when she suggested going to visit her hometown. We couldn't go and meet her parents, she said, as we were not married, but we could go and see the closest town. I jumped at the idea, and we flew to Khon Kaen. Apparently this was the closest big town. We spent a few days in Khon Kaen. I liked it a lot. I felt a lot more native in a place like this than back in Pattaya, where every next person looked like me, and I had seen a part of Thailand I felt like I could really get along with. From here, we visited Kalasin. While a lot smaller than Khon Kaen with far less amenities, I fell in love with the local feelings that this place offered. She showed me around to the temples, and we went to local restaurants, and I really started to think like I could live here. I didn't tell her at first. I wanted to see what she would say. She never once mentioned moving back to her hometown. Back in Pattaya, I got talking to another expat who said he had a house in Ubon province, further south than Kalasin, but still in Isan. He said he spent his time between his house there and Pattaya, and his wife was from there as well. He did tell me one thing: foreigners can't own land in Thailand, so his house belonged to his Thai wife. They'd been together for years, he said, and he's never had an issue with her. That conversation got me thinking of all the possibilities that were open to me. Maybe I could do the same. We could have a house in her hometown and holiday in Pattaya as often as we liked. I thought of the best way to share this as an option with her. I didn't know at the time that this was a very common thing for people to do in Thailand, and many times it ends in disaster. I thought I was a pioneer, doing what very few people had done before. I was scared she was going to be against the idea, so I took her out for a nice meal and brought the whole idea up over a few drinks and some great Thai food. Immediately her face lit up. She thought it sounded like a great idea, and she even said that we could build the house on some of our family's land so we wouldn't need to buy any land. Wow, that sounded like a great idea to me. But then I remembered her saying she couldn't take me to visit her family as we were not married. I mentioned this to her and she said yes, that was true. We talked more about what our dream house was like and then moved on to another topic of conversation. I was quite excited at the thought of having a countryside pad, maybe have a few animals, I could have a games room and everything I could never have before. A few weeks went by and I couldn't stop thinking about the idea. I just couldn't shake it off, and I was getting back into the daily pub crawls around Pattaya, which I wanted to avoid. So, I asked her to marry me, and let's follow the dream. She said yes, and that was that. It could be all steam ahead. I had no idea how to get married in Thailand, so I contacted a firm to help me out. They sorted it all out, with me needing to go to the UK embassy to get some documents. They even acted as witnesses at the local district office. But before this, we went to visit Kalasin and her family. I should have got cold feet after seeing the conditions in which they lived. Her mother, father, two brothers, one sister and her own daughter lived in a very poor quality house with only 2 bedrooms and an outdoor bathroom. I wish I knew what was to come, but I thought they must like it. Her family were very welcoming and treated me great. We said we were engaged and due to marry soon. It was here I was told we needed to do a village ceremony, and the talk of sinsot was mentioned. I didn't like the sound of this, but I asked her to marry me. She never forced anything, so I simply agreed, and the ceremony was arranged for 2 months' time. Back in Pattaya, we got the legal marriage out of the way, but if I'm being honest, I was thinking about our future house. I had it all pictured in my mind. By the time the ceremony had come around, we had already contacted a firm to begin the house. It was going to cost 5 million baht, including finishings. It was going to be big. The land that we were given was great as well, about 1 rai in size and in a private corner of the village. We married and had a great time. Drinks were flowing and the village seemed to welcome me with open arms. I was loving it. We had yet to decide what we were going to do when the house was under construction. Where were we going to live? I knew I wanted to be involved, so we decided to rent a small place in Kalasin in the meantime. It was only 20 minutes to where our house was going to be. When construction began, it was like a dream. Compared to the house I had sold in Spain, our Thailand home was going to be palatial. 5 bedrooms, a games room, a full Western-style kitchen. We also built a wall around the perimeter and even thought about adding a pool at some point. There was going to be ample room for a nice garden, and I couldn't wait for the construction to come to an end and we could finally move in. The firm we employed to build were good. I heard a few stories about Thai builders, which is why I used a firm to do the job, but I felt like I needed to be on site a lot of the time to make sure things were done the correct way. And to be honest, they were, and the house slowly progressed. 3 months later, the house was well on its way to completion. The basic structure was in place and the interior was being worked on. Looking at the house from a distance, I was so proud of what an amazing house it was going to be. By this time, we were choosing the finishes, the tiles, the bathroom suite, the kitchen, the paint, and all the other things that were going to complete the house. It was even bigger than I was expecting, and there was ample room for guests to come as well. A few months later, the house was done. All it needed now was furniture. I found this to be the most exciting part of the whole project. Going to choose out all my own things. Designing the games room was the most fun of all. I got a pool table, a huge television on the wall, and a few games consoles, along with the most comfortable chair I'd ever sat in. It was my dream. We moved in not long after. My wife was happy and I was ecstatic. The dream I had envisaged not even a year ago had come true, and I was ready to live the rural life in our amazing home. The house belonged to my wife, but I didn't care. We never had any issues until something happened that sent my world upside down. A few days after moving in, her parents turned up with her daughter and proceeded to have a good look around the house. They were smiling and seemed excited. My wife was happy as well, and a few minutes later, she said they were going to have this bedroom, pointing to the one next to ours. I thought she was joking and laughed, but she seemed confused. I could tell by her expression that this was no joke. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Our house is big enough for my family. That's why we built it so big," she said. No, I said. "This is our house. No one else is going to live here." "Yes, they are," she said. "I have told them ever since we started building it that it is for everyone and they are going to live here. The rest of the family will move in soon as well." This hit me like a sledgehammer. We had a huge row and the parents looked at me in a very different way. This was meant to be my dream home for me and my wife, not for her entire family. My wife couldn't see the problem. She said their house is no good and now everyone can have their own rooms and have a better time. They would never go into our room, she said. I was adamant that this was not going to happen, but it dawned on me that there was nothing I could do. It was then that I went online to try and find some things out. It turned out that I was no pioneer at all, and many foreigners had been burned by doing similar things. Up until this time, I was not someone who used social media or spent much time online, and how I wish I was. No matter what I said, I couldn't change the fact that her parents had moved in, and a few days later, her brothers and sister had each claimed a room. I told my wife how unhappy I was, and I wanted them to move out, but she said that they had already moved in. How could she get them to do that? She'd been telling them ever since the bill started that they could live here. For her, it seemed so normal. That's why she never told me. If she had told me that I would have no choice on the matter, even when the house was half done, I would have stopped the build. I resigned myself to the fact that I could do nothing about it and tried to get on, but it was hell. Food and drink left in the fridge was taken, my games room was being used by her younger siblings, and I was expected to pay the electric bill with them all using the AC, even though they never had this in their old house. Living in the house became a nightmare, far short of the dream I was expecting it to be. Me and my wife had many arguments, all related to her family, and I was getting so fed up and bored with being there. After about a year, I gave her an ultimatum. Either her family moves out, or we get divorced and I leave. I'm writing this from back in Pattaya now. We did get divorced. I couldn't take it, and I am lighter to the tune of about 6 million baht. I emptied the house of all my things, TVs, my games consoles, I had to leave the pool table, my oven, and everything that I could fit on the back of my pickup. I'm lucky in the sense that this has not ruined me. I have since bought a nice 2-bedroom condo in Pattaya in my own name and have taken this as a lesson learned. It hasn't affected my way of life, and I do take comfort in the fact that the house is already falling into disrepair. They could not afford to maintain it properly. If I look back at what went wrong, it was my complete lack of knowledge of all things Thailand and how things worked here. As I said, until I started to do a bit of research long after I should have done, and now find myself being ultra cautious. 6 years have passed since I moved out, and I am married again. Knowing what I know now, there is no chance of me losing any money in the same way. Life is great, and I'm now a seasoned Thailand professional. My advice for anyone coming to Thailand is research, research, research. Understand the culture, the way they do things, and what could go wrong before you've even stepped foot in the country, and you'll avoid the stupid mistake I made. Henry. Wow, Henry, thank you so much for sending this email in. I really, really appreciate you sending this in. And first things first, I would like to say I'm happy that you're back on your feet and everything's okay and it hasn't caused you much issue. But a 6 million baht lesson is quite an expensive lesson to learn, isn't it, at the end of the day? And yeah, I think that the issue that you had, and I think you allude to this and you're pretty clear on the issue that you had, is that you didn't know what Thailand was like before you actually made the move. Before you did anything, you didn't do the research. And the research is all there online. You could have found out exactly what can go wrong, exactly what can happen before doing that. And although I think it's sort of admirable that you're sending this story in to share with people, unfortunately, there's always going to be the people who don't do the research before they do things and research after when things have gone wrong. But I think you're right in saying that this is a difficult one, isn't it? Because oftentimes, well, a Thai family always comes first at the end of the day. Thai family always comes first. If you're married to a Thai, they'll put their Thai family first. Usually, I mean, not every time, of course. There are always exceptions to the rule. There are always exceptions. But in your case, it seems like if the family hadn't moved in, you'd still be living there now and everything was great. It seemed like you brought everything up with her, thinking you were being original. And that's what I find to be quite the hardest thing to read about this story. You brought the idea up of the house, thinking she wouldn't like that idea. Of course she's going to like that idea, getting a house in her own name out of you. Of course she's going to like the idea. But you were sort of thinking that she's not going to like it. And if you'd done your research, you'd have known what was going to happen. And all it would have taken was a bit of a Google, a bit of a look around, and you could have seen, some of the pitfalls of getting involved and of building a house like that. What you should have done is perhaps got a lease on it, so you'd have been able to tell them to leave. But if you told them to leave, perhaps the entire village would have turned against you. Perhaps your wife would have turned against you. And then would you want to live in that house, in that position, without anyone liking you? And that's something to bear in mind as well. If you're building a house in the village of your Thai wife, if you're building a house like that, even if it belonged to you, let's just say in an imaginary world, the house, the land belongs to you. This is imaginary, of course. Would you want to live in the vicinity of all the people who you've turfed out your wife who comes from the local area, you've turfed out her family who comes from the local area? The house belongs to you. You're probably not going to be able to sell it because it's far more expensive than anyone in that area can afford. Would you want to live there? Now, some people might, but I know I wouldn't if that happened to me. So that's something you've got to bear in mind as well. My top tip, I've always said, if you're getting a house in the countryside, great, go for it. But don't do it, smack bang in the village where your wife comes from. Do it 10 minutes away, 15, 20 minutes away. Can still do it. And just have a bit of distance separating you and the family. That would be my top tip. But anyway, Henry, as I said, I really, really appreciate you sending this in. It does mean the world. And to you guys watching, thanks so much. Appreciate you guys watching to the end. And as I said, as always, if you have any stories that you want to share, please do so by using the email address in the description. And please do bear in mind, though, that, we do need these stories to be of a certain length. I've had quite a few in that have been, it's only taken 2 minutes to read out. So that doesn't really have a place. It needs to be of a reasonable length. So if you're sending a story in, please take that into consideration. But if you could give the video a like, subscribe, comment, do all those things. That way we've got more chance of getting the videos to more people, more chance of getting more stories in to continue with the channel into the future. Really appreciate you guys watching, and I'll catch you in the next viewer's email. Bye for now.